Richard Merritt spent years building a successful career as a respected attorney in Georgia, earning the trust of clients who relied on him during some of the most difficult moments of their lives. To friends, co-workers, and many of the people around him, Richard appeared intelligent, confident, and committed to his profession, giving very little reason for anyone to question the image he presented. However, behind that successful public image, serious financial problems had quietly been developing for quite some time without attracting much public attention. Prosecutors later accused Richard Merritt of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from several of his own clients through an elaborate fraud scheme that eventually caught the attention of investigators. As the evidence continued growing, authorities charged him with multiple financial crimes, leaving his legal career hanging by a thread. By early 2019, Richard Merritt was scheduled to appear in court for sentencing, where he expected to learn how much time he could spend behind bars for those convictions. Instead of preparing for that important court appearance, investigators believe he made a decision that would permanently change countless lives forever. On the afternoon before his scheduled sentencing hearing, Richard visited the home where his mother, Shirley Merritt, was living in Georgia. At first, nothing about the visit appeared unusual, and nobody believed anything was seriously wrong during those early hours. Later that day, family members became increasingly concerned after they were unable to contact Shirley despite making several attempts throughout the evening. Those concerns quickly intensified when someone decided to check on her personally, instead of waiting any longer for a response. Inside the home, they discovered Shirley Merritt dead, immediately transforming what had seemed like an ordinary day into a homicide investigation. Detectives responded to the scene and immediately began collecting forensic evidence while interviewing relatives, neighbors, and anyone who had recently spoken with Shirley. As investigators carefully reconstructed her final movements, one important detail continued standing out above everything else they uncovered. Richard Merritt had been one of the last known people to see his mother alive before her death. Investigators also learned something else that dramatically changed the direction of the case almost immediately. Richard never appeared in court the following morning for his scheduled sentencing in the financial fraud case. Instead, he had completely disappeared, without contacting authorities, family members, or anyone else who might explain where he had gone. With both investigations now connected, law enforcement agencies launched an extensive search that eventually stretched across several different states. His photograph was distributed nationwide, while investigators asked the public to report any possible sightings that could help locate him. For months, there appeared to be very few meaningful leads, despite the widespread search conducted by multiple law enforcement agencies. Authorities continued reviewing surveillance footage, financial records, digital evidence, and witness statements, hoping one small detail would eventually reveal his location. Their persistence finally paid off more than 6 months after Shirley Merritt's death shocked both investigators and her family. Richard Merritt was ultimately located in Tennessee, where authorities believed he had been living under a different identity while attempting to avoid capture. His arrest finally brought the nationwide manhunt to an end and allowed prosecutors to fully focus on preparing the murder case for trial. During the investigation, prosecutors argued that the physical evidence, digital records, and witness testimony created a clear timeline connecting Richard to the crime. The defense challenged parts of the prosecution's case and questioned several conclusions presented during the trial. After listening to weeks of testimony and reviewing the evidence presented in court, jurors began their final deliberations. The jury ultimately found Richard Merritt guilty of murdering his mother, rejecting the arguments presented by the defense. The conviction marked a dramatic conclusion to a case that had originally centered on financial crimes before escalating into something far more tragic. Following the guilty verdict, the judge sentenced Richard Merritt to life in prison for the murder of Shirley Merritt. For Shirley's family, the sentence could never undo the devastating loss they experienced, but it finally brought the criminal case to its conclusion. For many people who followed the investigation, the case remained difficult to understand because of the extraordinary contrast between Richard Merritt's professional career and the crimes that ultimately destroyed his future. A man who had once stood inside courtrooms representing clients eventually found himself standing before a judge, hearing a life sentence that brought his own legal story to an irreversible end.